We've got one for you. We're going to do the Waikiki Rough Water Swim, 2.4 miles. We'll start off on the Round the Island bike race, 115 miles. We'll knock 3 miles off of it, because that puts us at Aloha Tower, the starting spot for the Honolulu Marathon. About 140 miles. We're going to do it all in one day. That's right. And whoever crawls across the finish line first, we'll call him the Ironman.
To most who were at that gathering, Commander John Collins' challenge sounded crazy, but 15 men showed up for the first Ironman, and astonishingly, 12 finished. The early Ironmen were mavericks, most of them with part-time jobs and a full-time addiction to exercise. The hole in the head of the trophy, it seemed to make sense.
Here comes the sun.
Dawn, 10 years after that first Ironman. The scene has changed from Oahu to the big island of Hawaii. The entry list has grown from 15 to over 1,200. A doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, an artist, a nun, men and women from 32 countries and 45 states. The veterans say, in these last moments before the start, you get a kind of peaceful feeling that the sheer intensity of what you do on this day isolates you from everything else in your life.
There we go! The 1988
So it began, the 12th Ironman Triathlon. Ahead, a 2.4-mile swim, 112 miles on the bike, and then a marathon. Any athlete entering this event will have done in preparation a volume of exercise unthinkable to the average person. Someone who has been involved with endurance sports all her life is Diana Nyack.
In 1979, when I completed the 89-mile longest swim in history, it was considered a unique accomplishment. And a year after that, when I came to Hawaii for the first time to cover the Ironman, the training that these esoteric triathletes were putting in at that time, 8 hours a day or so, was still absolutely unheard of in the rest of the world of sports. And believe me, just a short 10 years ago, it would have been an enormous leap of faith to imagine that now thousands of people have actually changed their entire lives just to be able to finish this extraordinary event.
The leaders were expected to finish in roughly 8.5 to 9 hours. But for hundreds of others, this was the beginning of a long day's journey that would not end until well after dark.
Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of sport.
Baby, look at, oh, baby.
Matt's belly really hit the side of that.
Put yourself on the line. If you can run, bike, and swim with the best of them, come answer the challenge of the Bud Light U.S. Triathlon Series. To obtain an entry form, call 1-800-453-4000. The Bud Light U.S. Triathlon Series. The challenge has been made.
Bay, along Hawaii's Kona coast, the town of Kailua in the upper part of your screen. The swimming course takes you out to the boats in the foreground, then back to the pier. Water temperature, about 77 degrees.
Because the swim is the shortest discipline of the Ironman, the swim specialists you see here skimming the slight ocean swells make the most of this brief moment of glory as the big gun triathletes cluster a few meters behind. Now here's how drafting and swimming works. Mark Allen, there in the center of the screen, put a certain effort into moving water backward as he propelled himself forward. So Scott Molina, who you see here now, as his hands grabbed and pushed that water that was already in motion, he expended less energy in moving ahead than Allen did.
7:23. For the leaders, the swim was nearly half over. Many of the competitors see the three parts of this event in terms of time rather than distance. The swim is shortest, 10%. The biking, longest, 60%. Running takes 30% of the event's total time. Approaching the end of the swim after nearly 50 minutes in the water was the lead pack of swimmers. Marty LaCourie, who was watching his 8th Ironman event, waited on the pier.
Originally, the Ironman was a contest of specialists who hoped that their training in one event would allow them to hold on in the other two. So you had swimmers trying to get a lead and hold on, and runners trying to catch everyone from behind. They were like ships passing in the night. Now it's no longer that way. Scott Tinley is not an ex-runner, and Mark Allen is not a former swimmer. They are triathletes, close to national class in all 3 events. So the races are more wheel-to-wheel racing. You must stay in contact with the lead pack or you're out of it.
Rob Mackle completed the swim in 50 minutes, 20 seconds and was guided from the water by a few of the thousands of volunteers who make this race possible. Richard Wells was next, and behind him, quite a pack.
Rob Mackle from Indiana is a powerful swimmer, and you can see that his thick upper body musculature might be a hindrance to him as a runner. He led the dash through the transition sequence from freshwater shower into the change room for bike gear.
Next came 2 of the favorites, Mike Pigg, followed by the man who finished 2nd in the last 2 Ironmans, Mark Allen.
We are amazed year after year that no one walks to the next grueling task, they run.
Less than 2 minutes after exiting the water, Rob Mackle finished changing, boarded his bike, and headed out of town.
Rafting was allowed in the swim. On the bikes, there are marshals on motor scooters to make sure that every competitor has the same advantages.
The contestants continued to stream out of the water and head for the showers to wash the salt off their bodies. Dried salt on your skin is like sandpaper. Mike Pigg ran for his bike. At 24, he is one of the new breed of triathletes, taking a scientific approach to the sport.
This year's hot piece of equipment to make the bike ride faster is a black heart rate monitor worn strapped on the chest. It's a human tachometer. You push too hard, it beeps. Go too easily, it beeps. It doesn't care what the other guy is doing. It keeps you at your optimum pace.
Mike Pigg was away first, Mark Allen right behind. And a few seconds later, Scott Molina rode off after both of them. The course they were about to ride lies along the coast of the biggest of the islands, Hawaii. Like the other islands, Hawaii consists of the tops of submerged volcanic mountains. Mauna Loa, still an active volcano, is on the right. Mauna Kea, almost 14,000 feet high, is on the left, Hawaii's tallest mountain. The bike course runs north through barren lava fields. Gently rolling hills give way to a long climb to the town of Hawaii, where the riders double back, going downhill at first, then again through the lava fields, where the average rainfall is less than 1 inch a year.
Past Ironman winner Paula Newby-Frazier had completed her weakest part of the race and hustled to make up time on the other women. One she would have to chase was defending champion Erin Baker. Baker was 4th out of the water, but first onto the bike. She skipped the changing room with items like these shoes, pre-attached to the pedal.
2-time Ironman winner Scott Tinley had put himself at a disadvantage with a poor swim, but he already passed 25 people in the transition area. Mark Allen was having trouble too. His revolutionary tri-spoke wheel was thought to be worth a few minutes over the 112-mile ride. But 2 minutes into the race, he's lost that with a flat. 3 minutes later, he was back on the bike chasing the leaders and maybe doubting the rewards of being a technical pioneer.
Garrett McCarthy, a swimming specialist who came out of the water in 4th, led the early stages of the bike race until Mike Pigg reeled him in and moved into the lead. Mike was the dominant force in the 1988 triathlon season. Even his opponents described him in glowing terms as the future of the sport. His strongest suit is his biking. The sun up and the day stretching ahead, things could hardly have looked better for Mike. Mark Allen at the flat. Scott Molina was dropping back. Scott Tinley's swim was a disaster. But there was a lot of race left, over 100 miles more on the bike, and then a marathon. You are looking at six-time Ironman champion Dave Scott in last year's race. This year, Scott was a spectator, withdrawing on the night before the race with a knee injury. Scott had always set the pace, with the others trying, mostly in vain, to match him. Pacing yourself through the long, hot Ironman day. How fast, how hard can you go and still make it to the finish? Mike Pigg admires Dave Scott, has studied his times, and may well have expected to be following him right now instead of setting the pace himself. But Mike Pigg likes to lead. He's young, he's confident, he's tough.
Oh, I love tearing people up on the bike, you know. In short course races, my goal is to say, see if you can go as hard as I can, you know, and if they can, then let's see if you can run as fast as I can going that hard. And I just love that. I love it. You know, if they can stay with you, great, but see how well you run. This race, you gotta be a little bit careful because you got guys going head to head for 5 hours, and you gotta be more intelligent. Where in the short course races, you can just let it all out. Just go as hard as you can. And here you have to be smarter. It's hard out there, and you're going through a lot of stress, and you can't believe how much pressure this race puts on everyone. And it's hot out there, and you're tired, and you're hungry, and you name it, everything's going wrong.
In second, a rarity in the sport, a top competitor from Pennsylvania, Ken Glah, here just 100 yards behind Mike Pigg.
Even though the beast from the east is a strong cyclist, he hasn't caught Mike Pigg from behind on a bike leg all season.
In third was 28-year-old Scott Molina in his first Ironman since 1983. Molina in the past has been badly affected by the heat, and in his 3 tries here, he's had to quit twice.
The women were setting an unprecedented pace on the bikes. Erin Baker, Paula Newby-Fraser, and Jan Ripple pushed with an intensity that began to resemble last year's race. New Zealander Erin Baker first came to the Ironman with a reputation of eating nails for breakfast. In '87, she fought from behind and smashed the course record, but it had been a gruesome day. Baker had wilted under the volcanic heat the year before in '86, so in '87, she wisely built her race. As she found her strength reserve late in the marathon, the '86 champ, Newby-Fraser, was fading and resigned herself to walking.
I guess I had mentally decided I wasn't going to win. I felt, although it didn't show, I felt a lot of pressure last year coming into the race, particularly after what happened in 1986. I felt that a lot of people were, oh gosh, you know, what if she was a fluke? You know, she only won because Patricia was disqualified, and it kind of got to me. I was extremely nervous before the race last year, and I think I had, on the run, a very mentally weak run. And it's really tough. It's also very tough to be out in front. It's a long day to be leading that race, especially the run. And particularly when every time the leaderboard comes up, they go, well, they're getting closer, they're getting closer. I knew that they were going to get me. And by the time they did get me, I sort of resigned myself to the fact that they were just going to go by.
This year, Baker and Newby-Fraser once again scorched down the bike course in anticipation of the duel that had not previously included this woman, Jan Ripple. She had been up with them on the bike before, but fell apart, literally, when time came for her heavier structure to run. Her husband and 3 children had also felt the letdown in 1987.
My oldest daughter, first thing she said, did you win? And I explained to her that Mom had a little bit of trouble at the end.
A little bit of trouble was actually a great deal of excruciating pain. She was spent physically, but her vision of the finish line remained intact.
Come on, Jan, walk. Walk, Jan.
And it's almost like having children. I know after having my first baby, I said, I'm never going through this again. This is painful. This hurts so bad. That you hold that little baby in your arms and you totally forget about that pain. You don't even remember it again. But although it hurts so bad during the race, it feels so good at the finish line that you forget about how hard it really was. I think a lot of people just, you know, think we're a little crazy. But it motivated me for a whole year. So in a way, it was a blessing in disguise because that really has motivated me for this race. Because I can look back on that, and if I can get through last year, I know I can get through this year.
'88 was a brand new year for Jan Ripple. Her body, considerably leaner, told the tale of some long training runs. On the bike, she again cruised with the former Ironman winners, but this time she had no intention of crawling across the finish line.
Further back on the road to Hawi, men and women with little chance for fame or glory raced for their own private dreams and hoped to finish. 57-year-old Patty Perkins would not make the deadline for the swimming segment. And through the day, 85 others would drop out. But for more than 1,000, the race went on. And triathlon. Mark Allen, having repaired his rear tire, was fourth and catching up.
There is a development of technology in our sport, mainly with the bicycle, to improve the aerodynamics, which will improve your performance. However, this course is not limited so much by those outside external factors. It's more limited by how your body handles the heat, the humidity, and the wind for 8.5, 9 hours. And until somebody comes up with something that you can eat or drink or whatever, maybe have somebody run next to you with a shade over your head so you don't get hot, it's going to be your body that limits you in this race. And because of that, that is going to be the standard, who can train their body to withstand the heat, not who has the best bicycle out there.
A mile or so beyond the point where Mark Allen and the other bikers are headed is the town of Hawi and this painted bronze statue of King Kamehameha I, who ruled the Hawaiian Islands 200 years ago. Hawi is a far cry from the condo-studded resorts we have come to expect in Hawaii. Haircuts are $4. No waiting.
Head at your tail? No. You're not gonna...
The laundromat is probably the town's busiest place. Hawi is somewhere that time and the Ironman has passed up. But from the looks of things, nobody seems to mind. More than 2 hours after the bike segment began, Mike Pigg arrived on the outskirts of Hawi, still in the lead.
More than anyone, Pigg needs a 10-minute lead off the bike. He's not the strongest runner. At halfway, he doesn't have it yet.
Pigg, just leaving the turnaround, saw his pursuer, Glah, emerging from the shadows as Glah headed into the turnaround just scant seconds behind.
Glah is a strong rider who had the fastest bike split in last year's race. Now he's bridged the physical and psychological gap that Pigg had opened up on the hills to Hawi. Now, it was Glah's turn to test Pigg's resolve.
Scott Molina was third.
Molina had been down as much as 4 minutes and made up 2 of those on the hills to Hawi. This was a good sign. Performance on the hills in a bike race is often a window to the future, an indication of what everyone has in reserve.
Heading south and downhill, the Mamuku winds at their backs, Mike Pigg was still out front, but Ken Glah had decided to make his move and took the lead for the first time. Pigg and Glah would exchange the lead for several miles while Scott Molina began to close on both of them. Mark Allen in fourth arrived at the turnaround 2 minutes after Molina had gone through and seemed to be in trouble. Another flat. It would take him more than 5 minutes this time before he replaced the wheel and was underway again. Despite his valiant effort, Mark Allen would not again be a contender for the lead. Ironic, this man who had so much confidence in his body was let down by his machine.
When I ABC's Wide World of Sports continues. Now from New York, Frank Gifford.
The Bud Light Ironman Triathlon World Championship.
52 miles into the 112-mile bike segment of the Ironman Triathlon, 27-year-old Aaron Baker from Christchurch, New Zealand, led the women's race at the Hawi turnaround.
About 5 miles before the turnaround, Baker had initiated a surge to leave Paula Newby-Fraser and Jan Ripple. She began pushing a heavier gear into the headwinds, seemingly determined to make a statement in taking the lead. Out of the turnaround, Baker would feel the immediate and welcome pressure on her back from a slight tailwind, and she would discover that the shadow of her two pursuers was ever present. Paula Newby-Fraser and Jan Ripple were only 1 minute behind. All three women had so far pushed a furious pace on the bikes. They were an impressive and a mere 16 minutes behind the lead men. But the effects of this fast pace remain to be seen. There's Newby-Fraser in the green, grabbing a drink. And that's Ripple there, clenching an extra water bottle with her teeth. About 60 miles more in the saddle ahead.
After Hawi, the course retraces itself, again crossing the lava fields below Mauna Kea on its way to the point where the marathon begins. Mike Pigg had retaken the lead and had managed to shake off Ken Gla. This is the Queen Ka'ahumanu Highway. They call it the Queen K. Scott Molina was still third, but he was closing inexorably on both Pigg and Gla. Molina had not considered himself among the favorites, but a slight haze made it fractionally cooler than in other years, and this appeared to give him confidence. Kenny Gla, Molina was coming, and he knew it. The pass was a foregone conclusion. Molina's problem is that he sweats a lot, gets dehydrated, and then can't replace his bodily fluids fast enough. And he winds up like this. This was 1981, the first year he did the Ironman. Scott lives and trains in these mountains near Boulder, Colorado. Except for a poor 87 season and the Ironman, he has been the world's top triathlete since 82. But not doing the Ironman, it's like a race driver passing up the Indy 500.
Some years, you know, I've really felt like I wish I would have done it. But then I hear the weather report, and I see the results, and I see the condition that some of the athletes come home in, and I'm extremely glad that I didn't go.
Erin Baker lives with Scott in the isolation of the mountains. They had known each other for years through their racing, but the relationship only blossomed a few months ago. Since then, the two have marveled at how totally alike they are, the American and the woman from a sleepy small town across the Pacific in New Zealand.
At times, I don't want to accept the amount of work involved. You know, I don't want to think that this is what I'm destined to do for the next 5 or 10 years, this amount of work. But seeing her go through the same thing, you know, it makes it easier to accept.
When we're training so long and so hard every day, it's hard to go out and do the real quality work. Being around each other, it just reminds both of us, you know, one of us is having a good day each day, and so it reminds the other person just to go out and train or do something that they don't really want to do.
Scott was in second with 18 miles to go on the bike course, while just a few minutes back along the Queen K, Erin was leading the women's race. But while Molina was catching Mike Pigg for the men's lead, Erin was watching her lead slowly eroded by Paula Newby-Fraser. You see her there on the left. And remember, Paula won the race 2 years ago. Erin won it last year. These two are the best. And incidentally, they were running well ahead of Erin's overall record set a year ago. Jan Ripple was third. Diana Nyad was with her.
Jan, is it hard work out on the bike today, or are you feeling within yourself?
I feel like I'm not pushing really hard, but I've got cramps.
Where?
In my quads, hamstring.
So Ripple had leg cramps, mostly the left hamstring. And the difficulty is, on the bike, you can't get your leg in a different position to relieve the muscle fibers. Ripple had major problems.
The battle for the women's lead intensified. Erin Baker, and on the right, Paula Newby-Fraser, as Paula Newby-Fraser retook the lead. Minutes later, a spoke had snapped on Erin Baker's rear wheel. This vehicle had been shadowing both Baker and Newby-Fraser. So, unlike Mark Allen, Erin was able to change her wheel quickly and resume her pursuit. Ahead in the men's race, leader Mike Pigg took a shower. in fourth after picking up 30 places was a man for whom coming from behind is a trademark, 31-year-old Scott Tinley. Tinley's won the race twice, and both times he's come from behind. The Queen K Highway, the treadmill upon which the men and women of the Ironman see their energy gradually seep away. It was early afternoon. After 108 miles on the bike, a traffic jam on the outskirts of Kailua. Scott Molina had caught Mike Pigg, and the two almost collided as Molina took the lead, then forded on, trying to shake his younger rival. A few miles back along the Queen K was Paula Newby-Fraser. The loneliness of the lava fields, a very different stage from those she performed upon in the years she studied classical ballet. In second place, receiving word Molina had taken the lead, his girlfriend Erin Baker. Still third, but dropping back, visibly in pain, was Jan Ripple.
Who knows, Ripple's weight loss to improve her running may have meant a fluid adjustment she just couldn't make over this long race. I'm sure she was reliving last year's nightmare in her mind by this point.
Scott Molina had pulled away from Mike Pigg with just half a mile remaining on the bike. Here Molina made the turn off Alihi Drive and headed downhill toward the Kona Surf Hotel, the transition point where he would leave his bike and begin the marathon.
It was the greatest day ever for cycling at the Ironman. Scott Molina would break Dave Scott's record for the bike leg by over 11 minutes. Usually the riders backed off the pace once in town to loosen and rest their legs for the run ahead. Since passing Pigg 4 miles from the finish, Molina had jammed hard. The last 15 minutes of his 4-hour, 36-minute ride had been extraordinarily hard. Now he would find out in the first few steps if he had been indiscreet.
Molina would be making his second equipment change of the day. With hours behind him on the bike and hours ahead of him on the run, seconds would still be vital. Mike Pigg swept in 46 seconds back.
Pigg had chosen a more conservative strategy in the final miles of the bike ride through town. He stayed within the upper limits of his heart rate monitor and soft pedaled to loosen his legs for the run. And off the bike, he was full of fighting spirit.
One egg to drink green. Bananas, oranges, exceed. Fine.
Like two prize fighters preparing for the final round, neither was willing to acknowledge the other. Neither was willing to show any sign of weakness by accepting a drink or any help. Molina left first. For a moment, running the wrong way, then correcting himself and running out toward the parking lot and the sound of the crowd.
Molina has an uncanny ability to come off the bike with fresh legs. He looked as if he had just come out of his house for his morning run.
Pigg followed, having lost a further 10 seconds.
Pigg has a naturally more awkward running style. It will take him longer to find a comfortable pace for the run.
As the marathon began, both Scott Molina and Mike Pigg were, in a sense, venturing into the unknown. That was Kenny Glaw on his bike about 4 minutes back. Molina could not know if the heat would stop him, as it had before. Pigg had never raced this long, this hard before. The course over which they would run begins along Alihi Drive, zigzags through Kailua, then heads into the lava fields to a turnaround, then back into town, where they finish the race immediately adjacent to the little beach where they began. If there was one man who really knew this course, it was Scott Tinley, now in his 9th Ironman. He was starting the marathon 12 minutes down, but not out by any means. Back in Hawaii, the race was taking its toll.
Sure not going to get any admiration for my time. The first woman ever to go under 5 hours on the bike, Paula Newby-Fraser, was in the position she least relished. She would now have to reenact last year's drama, running scared out front. Erin Baker arrived a long 9 minutes later after leg cramps slowed her over the last 30 miles of the bike course. On paper, Baker was the superior runner of the two, but she had a sizable gap to close and muscles that were not obeying her instructions.
Scott Molina on Alihi Drive, the Pacific Ocean in which he swam earlier, to his left. The aficionados along the course could hardly have expected to see Molina come by in the lead, and many thought that by pushing himself so hard at this stage, he would only hasten his eventual demise.
Liquid was foremost in Molina's mind. He was overwhelming his main competitors, but dehydration, lack of fluids, had laid him out in the past. He was determined to drink enough. For Piggott was a good place to be, ahead of everyone but Molina, who seemed to be jinxed at Ironman.
Newby-Fraser was acutely aware of her predicament. Pushed too hard now, and she would be forced to walk like last year. And better than anyone, she knew Erin Baker's ability in the marathon. Instant replay of 87. Baker chases and recaptures a full minute each mile. Right here, during the first steps of the marathon last year, Jan Ripple labored. It was to be the longest run of her life. She had said she could make it through anything after that. Well, this day, she started stronger, even after the cramps on the bike. Had she made herself into a runner, the 26-mile test lay ahead.
8 to 112. Unfortunately, in the Ironman triathlon, that is not enough.
Literally 2 minutes after starting the marathon, Ripple felt trouble. She had spent a year focusing on running for this Ironman, so it must have been doubly frustrating for her to experience the knotting in her hamstrings when she thought she was well prepared. It seemed that her nightmare of the year before was reoccurring. As she struggled with each step here, her husband prodded from the other side of the road. He yelled, "Jan, you've worked too hard, babe." Erin Baker hit a pace over the first 4 miles that gained her back 4 of the 9 minutes she needed to catch Newby-Fraser. She seemed to be striding comfortably until she reached the hill up out of town onto the highway. A severe cramp gripped her right thigh, and her entire body seemed to go into a tight spasm. Now here's the ultimate statement about the Ironman. This well-trained world champion shouldn't be cramping. But does she say, oh, well, bad luck for this year, I can't win it, why go through this intense pain? No. This race teaches you that surprises pop up. You have to face them, control them, somehow continue. Erin Baker is revered in this sport, and as we watched her deal with this crisis, we learned that it's not just her talent, but her grit that her peers admire. It's almost inconceivable that an athlete could be knotted with cramps one moment and running fluidly the next, but that's the power of desire. At this point, 6 minutes up the road, Newby-Fraser didn't know of Erin Baker's problems. Her own status was her only concern.
Most of all is I don't give any energy to my competitors. I don't think about them. I don't really think about who I'm competing against because like in a sprint race situation, all I do is think about my competitors. Like, God, how many seconds behind is she? You know, how fast is my transition? You know, you expend a lot of mental energy and you put your energy out to your competitors. In this race, I focus entirely on myself.
Mokuaikawa Church, built in 1837, the central landmark of the town of Kailua Kona, where a crowd had gathered 8.5 hours after the start to see the finish of the Ironman. These feet had run 24 miles. Mike Pigg on the outskirts of town. The question of whether or not Scott Molina would crumble had been answered. He would not, and time had run out on Mike Pigg. And the crowd was beginning to cheer as Scott Molina approached the finish line. A lifetime of doubts swept away.
He no longer made the effort to keep his emotions under control. He was on the verge of tears. He was just on the other side of the finish line that would make him a content man.
Mike Pigg finished 2 minutes later, not unhappy with his performance. He had done everything right. He had merely lost to the better man, and he knew it. Following Pigg was Ken Glah in third. Scott Tinley was fourth. And Mark Allen, who persevered after the cruel luck of the two flats, was fifth. But the day belonged to Scott Molina.
When did you know that you could win this one?
I never believed that I could win it until the end. I don't do well in the heat, and I've been in the medical tent for a while because of it. But, you know, it's important in order to be a spokesperson in this sport and to do well here. And that's important to me. So I knew I had to come back.
As Paula Newby-Fraser covered her last miles, excited spectators shouted that she was running 11th overall, higher than any woman had ever placed before. The enormity of the achievement began to sink in. For years, physiologists have offered the possibility that women are especially well-suited to endurance events, and that someday they might even exceed men. Paula Newby-Fraser has provided a glimpse into that future.
Compared to Newby-Fraser's red-hot day, Erin Baker's was lukewarm. She had suffered 4 major episodes of leg cramps, and even an iron will couldn't reclaim those precious lost minutes. Jan Ripple was in the medical tent. Her body had shown the first signs of breaking down on the bike, and by the time she tried to run, the fibers of her hamstrings were twisted. Despite dedicated training, her thighs just would not loosen up, and she grimaced under the physical discomfort and certainly the emotional disappointment. Neither water, nor food, nor good friends close at hand seemed to help.
Paula Newby-Fraser would finish the race in 9 hours, 1 minute, a time that would have won every men's Ironman until just 4 years ago. She had been able to overcome her self-doubt to run a nearly perfect race, to capitalize fully on a day of days. When destiny knocked, she was ready. Erin Baker put her name in the record book, too. Her time of 9 hours, 12 minutes, so broke the old record. New standards had been set. Still stretched out along the Queen K, those who would not be headlines the next morning. No matter, that wasn't why they came. This event is called the Ironman, but it is really about men and women who are fragile, who will push too hard, ask of themselves too much, dare to do more than is wise or prudent. It is about people going forth in pursuit of their own potential and becoming heroes along the way.
In a moment,